Ooh, here we go. The first ever VD podcast. Got to welcome, of course, onto the show the first of our guests, the legendary Mr. Robert Hennebry.
Hello, hello.
Let's just launch straight into it, Rob. Hit us with some words.
Okay, first one is a lovely little VD inspired bit called Short But Sweet. Sometimes it's an awful fear, and others I put down to anxiety. Sometimes it's near, but you travel often. Most times I'm torn because I get stuck for what to say. But every now and then, I love you.
Oh, very nice indeed. Lovely.
Thanks,
yeah, very heartwarming stuff. I mean, I've seen on Facebook that you were doing lockdown tunes 77.
Yeah,
77 or so? How many?
77, that's it, the 11-week mark. It all started, it wasn't supposed to be that. Naturally, I don't think anyone would plan to do that. It all started on Lydia, my fiance's birthday. Her birthday is the 24th of March. That was the day after the whole country went into lockdown. So that was a bit crappy for her. So I just did this one video to kick it off, and it got like this kind of overwhelming response. So I did another one, and then, you know, because they said lockdown was going to be like 3 weeks. So I thought, yeah, 3 weeks, 21 songs, I can do that. But yeah, just spiraled. I ended up kind of, you know, you get to day 50 and you're like, well, now I can't stop. So yeah, it was just one of those things that snowballed. It was fun.
I'm very interested in kind of the overlap between writing music and writing words, and whether kind of being a musician affects kind of how you go about writing poems, or in my case, you know, like obviously people listening may not know that you and I were in a band together back in the day. I remember very vividly being in your own family home when we were like 13 or 14 or something. We had guitars, and I remember that moment where it was kind of like we wrote this song that we called what was it called again?
2005.
2005.
Yeah,
2005.
Because it was 8:05 on the little digital clock, wasn't it? Yeah.
So I remember the moment of kind of inspiration when that happened, kind of like when I realised, holy shit, like
we can do this.
We can write songs, or, you know, and that this kind of
watch out, you too.
Yeah, but that's to take over the world. But it was that kind of it felt like a moment of magic when there was kind of like there was nothing before, and I didn't know how to do this thing, and then next of all I was doing this thing, and I didn't really know where it came from. Yeah,
and also the fact that when you're done, it hasn't just blown away in the wind. It's a tangible thing. You're like, oh, I have this thing, and you can then repeat it to people, and oh, look, I wrote this down, and then we play it, and you go, I did this thing, and I made this thing, and here it is.
So does your music playing, is there an overlap between how you write like a song and how you write a poem, or do you use a similar process, or is there differences between any of that kind of thing?
I'm going to be real fencist here and say yes and no, but definitely the origin of the process. For example, the poem I just introduced with, Short But Sweet, is inspired by Roger McGough, who's one of my absolute favourites. And throughout my sort of creative life, I've had these crisscross moments with great artists that have inspired me massively and taken me sort of Y-junction moments in my creative career, as it were. So musically, I just, you know, Roger McGough was a huge inspiration in showing that, you know, as a young kid, for example, I was never a great academic in school and stuff, you know, that I did okay. I was an okay student. I wasn't a flunk or anything, but you know, English and prose, I was never just into it. And I don't want to be mean and say that was down to lack of inspiring teachers and stuff, which
teachers,
which
the worst.
I'm willing to own the responsibility for being a very airy fairy kid. And you know, people who know
Let
me
me apologise on
behalf
of teachers. Everywhere. I am one of those didact fuckers who strangles the enjoyment out of.
Yeah, how dare you make me follow?
We gotta pass exams. I don't care what you actually think about this book. Write this fucking paragraph.
Well, it was when we started doing and writing music, and then you're like, okay, I can do this and do that, and then as I got into kind of more poetic lyric, like you start to listen to Bob Dylan, and then you start writing it down, and it's a very slow slip and slide between lyrics and poetry. For me it was anyway. And you always think that when you're young anyway, you think your musical lyrics aren't very poetic, and Roger McGough for me was one of those kind of flag post artists that made me kind of realise, oh, you can very much, you don't have to be part of an old school classic style clique of poetry. you know, it can be very pop culture, it can be very mod. You know, and Roger McGough was that for me.
Have you got a McGough poem that you turn to all the time?
Yes,
and give us a blast of.
I absolutely do. My favourite Roger McGough poem by a mile is "Let Me Die a Young Man's Death."
Oh yeah,
which is actually one of his earlier ones. Which is really, really, again, I only found that out. I say recently, but it was like 2 years ago. I read a book about him, and it was one of his early poems when he was kind of hanging out with Mike McCartney, you know, Paul McCartney's brother. So he was very that 60s beat set. And the idea, let me die a young man's death, but the theme throughout it is like, but not till I'm old.
Yeah.
So it's you know, so it's really, really good. I'll give you a blast now. Let me die a young man's death, not a clean and in between the sheets holy water death, not a famous last words peaceful out of breath death. When I'm 73 and in constant good tumour, may I be mown down at dawn by a bright red sports car on my way home from an all-night party. Or when I'm 91 with silver hair and sitting in a barber's chair, may rival gangsters with ham-fisted Tommy guns burst in and give me my short back and insides. Or when I'm 104 and banned from the cavern, may my mistress catch me in bed with her daughter and, fearing for her son, cut me up into little pieces and throw away every piece but one. Let me die a young man's death, not a free from sin tiptoe in candle wax and waning death, not a curtains drawn by angels born. What a nice way to go, death.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, he's a leg.
Yeah, I mean, I think that really goes with what I was kind of trying to touch on earlier, this sense of kind of the overlap between music and poetry. I guess what I'm trying to get at there when I'm I'm searching myself really for what I get from music when I'm trying to write, I think it's that breaking down of kind of barriers. You know, like I think literature and poetry can be like come with very heavy kind of, you know, this is serious art, this is high art.
There's a weight of history, I think, a weight of history in the classics, definitely in poetry.
Class markers.
As in, are you any good for getting content? And I genuinely think it's a problem in poetic cliques that the poet will be measured oftentimes by their form as opposed to their content.
Are you writing by the sonnet's rules kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of my other great inspirations, David Gascoyne, was very fast and loose with that. Don't get me wrong, very capable of the classics, but also maybe it's just occurred to me that maybe, you know, when you're so good at something, you can afford to be flippant with the rules. You know?
Yeah, Gascoigne's an interesting one, isn't he? Because he's kind of the only, well, I don't know, there were other surrealist poets, but in England, not really in England, like in the 1930s.
There was a scene,
but not in England. There wasn't.
No, not massive, but I mean, well, Gascoyne was sort of it. They were.
He
around.
Was the English surrealist,
but he was also the host. I think maybe we talked about this, but he was the organizer and host and performer at the either London or British Surrealist Convention or exhibition.
With the
1935. When Daly got stuck in the deep dive suit.
And who broke him out of it?
I think, well, there's differing stories. I think all the artists who were there claimed to have had some part in getting him out of it.
It's one of those urban legend things.
Yes. But to be fair, they're all probably true, because anyone who's ever seen or been near an old school deep diving suit, like, it's not a one-man job. So
yeah. There's a reason we don't wear those anymore.
Yeah, certainly not a bunch of 1930s surrealists who are probably high on laudanum.
Yeah, interesting. So Gascoyne. Just touching on that kind of whole difference between form and kind of, you know, for me, Gascoyne is kind of all about like the moment. You know what I mean? The kind of the vision, the first idea, like poet as visionary, kind of like tapping into kind of the subconscious. It's all about the subconscious, isn't it? Like
it definitely is. It definitely. It's like almost, dare we say it, the forbidden word, stream of conscious. You know, and to me, surrealism it almost rides straight from Roger McGough in that scene. Is almost like a seamless blend for those two for me, because weirdly, because of a John Lennon sentiment of saying, you know, someone once asked him what one of his songs was about, and he said, well, it's whatever you want it to be about. It doesn't matter what I think of it. I'm not the listener, I'm not the interpreter. And I think that's very, very true of surrealism. People you know, they get very stuck on what does it mean? What does it mean? And I think that's the wrong question, because it might mean something, it might not, but it's all about how do you interpret it? How does it make you feel? What does the art...
How does it make you feel?
Yeah, how does the art... What's the art provoke from you?
Exactly, because if it's going to work on a subconscious kind of level, it's not... It's kind of... You know, it's not it's not meant to be cerebral, it's meant to be visceral. It's meant to be kind of like...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Emotionally engaging rather than intellectually engaging. And I guess that builds into this whole difference between kind of like...
Yeah, exactly.
Emotion against form, or kind of like improvisation against kind of like very, very meticulous rewriting and kind of editing.
Yeah, I totally agree, because there is a thing for me anyway with a poem, sort of it practiced and unpracticed. I had this mini chapter which I changed the name of about 900 times, but I called it it was just called 4 a.m. because I found that was the time when I was working in the bars. I found it a really amazing time to be sort of halfway between sleep and awake, and I suppose if you had the ego, as opposed to if you were not self-conscious enough to let your consciousness or your conscience keep editing before you let a thought out. And that's sort of what surrealism is for me, because it's just the letting a thought out. Not to say that there's no meaning behind the original inspiration. So let's say something happens to you in the day where you see something, you go, oh wow, yeah, I might write about that later. But then just let the idea flow, let the idea do the work. And that's for me when the best sort of surrealist poetry came out. And Gascoyne had that a lot, and just so good at it. Yeah,
it's interesting. I think that kind of goes with my own experience of writing music. I remember when I was in a band with you, and you know, the band would be jamming in the room, and I'd go out into the corridor and just kind of like stream kind of images. It's quite interesting what comes when you kind of just switch off your analytical brain and you just kind of flow.
That's it, exactly. Stop analysing, you know, oh, is this the correct way to say this, and do I want to say it? Forget all those things. Once you've had the spark, for me, I don't know, is that the same for you when you were?
Yeah, I do think that's that kind of what happens. That's what it goes with, this kind of like sense of magic almost.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get into a mystification kind of thing, but maybe we'll talk about this a little bit later.
Because people can agonise, can't they? And I think that's, for me, it's always like, you know, I'm kind of the opposite to the, you know, I'll never ever agonise. I might hold back an idea for ages, almost like indigestion. And I'm like, no, it's like I can feel in the back of my brain when something is working. And I'm like, no, it's not ready yet. But then one night, you know, I might just wake up for a pee or something. But then I'm like, I'll get my pen. Bam! But I have to, once I start it, I have to put it down then.
Yeah.
Ugh. And then
McCartney waking up with the full version of, what song was it that he said he claims to have dreamed?
I don't know, but he probably did that a lot, and that's why he's a billionaire. he was like a
bastard.
It was Let It
Dreaming
Be.
Number
It was
one.
Let It Be. Yeah, he said his mom he had a dream that his mom came and was tinkling on the piano, and she was just telling him to relax. And he said he woke up, his anxiety was gone, and he had Let It Be in his head. I mean, there's a fucking lotto ticket.
Yeah. If it's not true, it's a really good marketing.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine he spent like 6 months writing.
He's been testing on it.
Got all the PR people to tell the story.
That's a good dollar. Have you got a bit of Gascoyne there that you could drop on the people?
A bit of David Yeah, do you know what I actually do? But I'm not going to read the whole thing, because the thing we just talked about, to me, was really, really well summed up in the second verse of the seventh dream is the dream of Isis. Do you know that one?
Yeah,
so
very well.
The seventh dream, the dream of Isis, for me was the poem. The reason I bookmarked that one specifically to talk about it was the poem that sort of made me go, oh, you know, about surrealism. Oh, you don't have to stick to anybody. Now, it might not be good, but it said to me that anything I was writing, I could just write it. It didn't have to be anything or be judged by anyone, as long as I was just peddling out ideas. That's all. So, I'll just read it. It was the second, this is verse 2 from And the Seventh Dream is the Dream of Isis. There was an explosion of geraniums in the ballroom of the hotel. There's an extremely unpleasant odour of decaying meat, arising from the depetaled flower growing out of her ear. Her arms are like pieces of sandpaper or wings of leprous birds in taxis. And when she sings, her hair stands on end and lights itself with a million little lamps like glowworms. You must always write the last 2 letters of her Christian name upside down with a blue pencil. She was standing at the window, clothed only in ribbon. She was burning the eyes of snails in a candle. She was eating the excrement of dogs and horses. She was writing a letter to the President of France.
Nice.
And that, to me, it said that there may have been, and you know, you can read up on Gascoyne, and people will always do analysis, and there may have been, like I said earlier, an overarching theme that made him kick off with that. But you know, for me reading, you just need to relax into the sentiment of the art, and that's what you get. Well, that's what I get from surrealism.
Yeah. It's these kind of weird collisions, isn't it, that in his poetry, for me, it makes it constantly kind of, a little bit unsettled almost. It's all a little,
totally. Well,
exploding, and the geraniums. Those are,
yeah.
Like the geraniums are so mundane and so kind of like Victorian garden, and then you really don't expect that to be kind of like, weaponized.
Absolutely.
There's another line in that poem that I love, which is something about a man walking on a tightrope covered with moths or something.
Yeah, that's down in verse 3. Yeah, it's I don't want to read the whole thing now and take up all the time on air, but yeah, there's lots of that, and it's there's also the part about the transaction, selling rats disguised as pigeons, giving terrible illnesses to the possessors of pistols.
Yeah.
Because he's not talking about a rat actually disguised as a pigeon. That line, it might just have been a part of the thought that was getting out the theme, and that's why I decided to go with verse 2, just because it's totally departed. Oh no, do you know what it is? Sorry, the one you're talking about is actually bang at the end of verse 1.
Oh yeah, I have it in my version here. It says
because the juxtaposition between the start of the second verse and the end of the verse, total departure. And it's just a new idea. But yeah,
the line goes, across the square where crowds are dying in thousands, a man is walking a tightrope covered with moths. It's that again. It's that weird, the tightrope. You get the sense of somebody about to fall. But then you have the moths that are kind of surely going to fly away, because why would they remain on the tightrope?
But also it forces imagery. Are they going to carry him?
Yeah, exactly. Is he going to take flight?
Is he going to take flight? Yeah.
So there's so many.
Or is he a man at all? Is it a bunch of moths in the figure of a man? Who knows? That's the point. Is you're forced to imagine
the power of ambiguity.
Exactly.
People are quite sniffy about him, though. He kind of he fell massively out of favour. I mean, Auden, that whole crew were all quite sniffy about him, and his kind of reputation was a bit. He got addicted to speed, I think, in the 70s. Stopped kind of writing very much.
But I mean, so what is my attitude when I hear? I try and remind myself of an album. Going back to music again, just that's the common ground, I guess. But try and remind myself of an album, and let's say it's an album you really, really like, but everyone you know goes, "Oh, it's crap." What does that mean? Apart from, sorry about that. But what does that mean apart from the fact that they don't like it and you do like it? That's literally all it means, And for people to get, okay, so some people who are in the know got sniffy about Gascoyne, and everyone knows that. And to me, all that means is they didn't like how he was moving and shaking, because they really liked him when he was playing the game. They really liked his poetry when he was being a poet. But then they all of a sudden didn't like his back catalogue when he started behaving differently. So to me, it is. I think you've hit the nail on the head with the word sniffy. And to me, like I said, all it says is some people didn't like it, but it changes nothing about him for me.
Yeah, it probably didn't help that most of his kind of influences were French surrealists, and the whole French kind of English, there's a constant.
But then going back to sniffy, then dare it be said that, well, if anyone has the right to be sniffy in the world of surrealism, it's probably the French. Maybe have the ground from which to look down.
Maybe. You got another poem you're gonna?
Yeah, inspired by our very own David Gascoyne.
Great, take it away.
So we'll wrap up our Gascoyne segment with this one called Thud. My mind is gone. Am I strong? Is that wrong? It'll be back before long, and I'll start to pay attention again. Until then, my friend, you and I will bob gently in the doldrum, not stuck and not waiting, not sailing, just being, not wanting. It's daunting to think that anxiety evaporates, stress and argument dissipate by not wanting. I want that. And every now and then, when the universe decides, we get found and caressed with regrets of cries we should have had. I swear I still feel it getting heavier and slipperier. But we hold on, don't we? You and me. Is this the bottom? It's so calm.
Oh, very nice.
It's called Thud.
Thud. Yeah. So how has Gascoyne kind of wormed his way into that one then?
Well, David Gascoyne inspired that poem not directly but in style, because when you could probably I'll never claim to be anything as good a poet as him, but if you went through my books of notes, you'd find like whole probably chapters where you could go, he was definitely reading this poet at the time, and stuff like that. So when I say inspired in the style, so that was about the poem was about an old years ago breakup that was actually rethought of when I got engaged. So because when I got engaged, it's the theory goes that it's the last ever relationship you'll be in. So your mind just
hopefully.
The theory goes, I said. I'm pretty willing to say on air.
Is that
definitely.
hopeful? I don't know. Depends on how many marriages you set out to get.
Just the one will do me. Just the one will do. So your mind goes back to all these things.
Party line there, Rob.
Listen, definitely, that is what's happening. And so the idea of talking about bobbing gently on the doldrum, and it was more inspired by the Gascoyne-esque imagery, like anxiety evaporating, and then saying that your worries go away by not wanting, and you want that. So the juxtaposition is brought in by the Gascoyne influence, and like I said, the imagery very much as well. And he's sort of like an inspiration that I'll lean back on and go, sometimes if I'm stuck for not what to say but what to see, I'll go, what would David Gascoyne do? And you don't often think of, he might do this. What it actually makes you do is relax about editing yourself.
It's interesting, you're relaxing about editing yourself. I mean, personally, I guess poetry is quite a different format to prose. I normally write kind of prose. But I feel like in myself, one thing I had to kind of train myself to do, having come from a kind of music background, and for me writing was always like, streaming it, because that's what I used to do when I was writing songs. Yeah. That's what I used to do, was writing lyrics. It's kind of like, the exact kind of stuff you were talking about, opening the door to the subconscious and kind of streaming whatever came.
But do you find you got better at that with practice, as in,
streaming?
Yeah, which is weird. I know that's a weird question.
That has never been my problem. My problem actually has always been, as a writer, my complete I really don't want to go back and edit. I used to not. Okay. I enjoy the process of the first idea and the kind of the flow.
Yeah.
And it's taken me a long time to realize that if you're gonna kind of, well, for me anyway, that if I'm going to create anything kind of worthwhile, that it needs kind of multiple rewrites, especially in kind of something the length of a novel, because it's like the first idea is great, I get the energy down, I get the kind of like the vision of what I want to do, but then it's about kind of like stripping it back.
Yeah,
like I only realized this, well, if you kind of, I guess you get older, you get a bit more mature in kind of your writing and a bit more disciplined in your kind of your editing or whatever. But I read Julie Meyerson talking about her writing style, and she was saying, like, a good day's writing results in less words, not more words. For me. Okay. So this kind of idea of like cutting stuff back.
That's actually very true of poetry as well, because you can find yourself when you think you're streaming, what you're actually doing is rambling. And yeah, so that rings true as well, because when you hit an idea, you know it.
Yeah.
As in, you know what you want to say.
I mean, you're just talking there about reams in your notebooks. I mean, even though, you know what I mean? Even though you think you're not editing, you know, selection is editing, isn't it? Or even kind of like...
Absolutely true. Absolutely true.
Yeah, interesting. Beckett's a big influence.
Huge. And I'm glad we've gone in that order, because weirdly my writing then flowed in, again, as McGough seamlessly into the Gascoyne phase, the Gascoyne phase seamlessly into Beckett. Now that sounds weird.
Because Beckett's complete opposite.
Yes.
He's not a streamer.
Well, he's an
not
absolute
a first idea. He's a
pristine
minimalist.
Academic at the highest of the high, you know.
Like how little can I get away with kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, this is the other thing. So it was actually, and I know he's not, you know, not most known for his poetry, but I remember when I first read Ooftish, and that's the poem that stands out for me about from Samuel Beckett, amongst so many good ones. But I first read Ooftish and I was like, okay, this is nonsense. What is this madness?
Yeah.
Now, I'm not going to pretend that it was very much down to my not understanding it. And I was like, I need to not talk about this till I know what it's about. So of course I went looking for kind of analysis on Ooftish, and I was like, what even is that word? And it turns out it's a Yiddish word. And I was like, oh, okay. And it's to do with, like, you know, put your money on the table, you know, put it down, pay up. And the whole poem, and there's lots of back and forth between Christianity and Jewish ideals, and there's this lurching from the meaningless of nothingness and actually trying to find some sort of place for ourselves in the nothingness. So yeah, that's what I loved about it. And when it got to the end, there's this kind of one of the analyses I read said there's this undeniable undertone of religious culture, and I actually think, in a cynical way, maybe that person wasn't Irish, because I think Samuel Beckett himself might, the more I read Ooftish, the more it comes across as cynical. That's the kind of thing almost you'd hear your nanny saying to herself in the kitchen, you know. Beckett then, as I got into reading analysis of his work, the thing that crossed over for me from surrealism was the dismissiveness of people looking for meaning. You know, like Waiting for Godot. If you're asking who Godot is, you've missed the point. You know what I mean? So, yeah,
it's interesting because there's kind of a thread developing here between kind of what we're talking about. Yeah. I mean, it's a very unlikely connection for me between McGough, Gascoyne, and Beckett.
Well, weirdly,
but even talking about that kind of whole thing of inspiration, you know, and songs, and where does inspiration come from, and, you know, is writing about the first idea, about the subconscious, about kind of tapping into things, or is it kind of about stripping these things back, being more disciplined and editing them?
Yeah.
But yeah, and this is kind of hooking back to what I was kind of intimating earlier about magic, or this kind of sense of kind of, where do songs come from, where does writing come from, where does the inspiration come from? Do you feel, because even in that Beckett kind of, you just talked about that poem there, which kind of has a religious, maybe it's a cynical religious kind of thing, but where's your thinking about, you know, what are you doing when you're writing, or where does it come from, or because
you mean in a spiritual sense?
Yeah.
Oh, great question.
Because Gascoyne believed he was like tapping into some kind of like, he was a visionary.
That depends entirely. Where you think it comes from depends entirely on the interpretation of you as a writer. So it's like saying, you know, there are people who do charitable work for Christian charities and Muslim charities and Jewish charities and all the major religions, right? And those people are convinced that they're doing God's work, and look, more power to them. And for me, it doesn't matter about the motivation slightly, so long as they think they're doing something good, and they are doing something good, and they think they're doing it for the right reason, and I think they are as well. And they're saying their inspiration, rather their motivation, is divine. Fine, if that's where they say it comes from, fine. But then what about what about Médecins Sans Frontières, and what about these people who are doing the very same stuff out of the very same motivation who say it's not divine, who say it's another end. So I say, look, it's down to the person themselves. For me, is it spiritual? The process, probably a bit.
Because you're an atheist, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I've heard
a staunch anti-theist. Yeah, a staunch anti-theist. Yeah. I got that word from Christopher Hitchens. Yeah.
So where does that fit, your atheism and your kind of? Because it sounds to me you've got an almost kind of like spiritual pantheism thing going on here, that you believe in some kind of like spirit.
Well, that's not at all in at loggerheads with atheism. You got to remember, it's atheism is atheology. It's I think there's a lot of very, very spiritual people who operate these days under the umbrella or guise of being religious, because that's just how they were brought up, So going back to Beckett, for example, if someone wants to say, oh, there's an underlying Christian theme, but that's going to be true of anybody who's writing in a spiritual nature, and they just happen to be brought up in stoically Catholic Ireland in that period. So, it's going to be a Christian undercurrent.
Was he? I think he was a Protestant. Was he?
No, I'm talking about his time and place.
All right.
So that's that. I'm talking about like the imagery you're surrounded with in society, the way people go about their business, Sunday best, and all of that. So, and it would be the same if you're brought up in any country that's dominated completely by religion. So you may yourself not be a proponent of that faith, but it's going to have, it just is your culture, So I don't know. Like I said, I don't think spirituality is at loggerheads with atheism at all.
Yeah, it's interesting because I am drawn to those writers myself. I mean, Gascoyne as well, and there's other writers I'm kind of drawn to with that kind of, vision and kind of inspirational kind of thing. And I do wonder if it's kind of tapping into something that's almost like as a lapsed Catholic, like long lapsed.
Yeah. Well, I remember, for me,
have I got a God-shaped hole in me that kind of looks for, you know what I mean? That's looking for these kind of, for something to fill this what used to be a spiritual place to me, which is now kind of like a kind of almost.
Well, you're
like
falling
piece of nihilism.
You're falling for a Charlie Kirk argument there. Charlie Kirk is this like right-wing commentator who goes around. I'm not going to actually criticise the guy because he does hold his debates in the way I think debates need to be held these days. It's not just people going around shouting insults at each other. They sit down and they discuss. And when people do disagree with him, he says, you know what? Hey, I appreciate you coming and thanks for that. And although I do disagree with him, I appreciate the way he hosts his debates. But he says things like, well, if you have no God, where do you get your moral compass? And it's, to me, it's a mad question because that's an assumption that people had no moral compass until they arrived at Mount Sinai and got the Ten Commandments. It's like, whoa, time did not start then, But
the Bible did not.
Yeah, exactly. It's not deliver us morality, So, we're getting way away from it. But so no, I don't think you have a God-shaped hole in you, but it falls for the argument, but it does beg the question: do we strive for or chase a spirituality, or when the ceiling, I would say, of a religion is lifted from your imagination and mind, does it feel empty because you're searching a much, much bigger space, i.e. you're just looking out to the universe?
Interesting. What are you going to give us next? Are you going to give us some Beckett, or are you going to give us one of your own?
I will. What have we done? We've done Gascoyne and McGough. So I could read you Uftish, the Beckett poem that inspired it, or I could read you the one that Samuel Beckett inspired in me.
Let's start with you, and then let's have Beckett after.
Okay. This one's simply called SB, and I wrote it very, very early in my reading of Samuel Beckett, just because it's loose in form but attached to a form, but also it doesn't it doesn't grovel for the listener to understand in any way. It's just nice, I think. So it's called SB. O'er golden cliffs in summer breeze we tread harshly, in pursuit of love's lead, only to flounder in shallow seas, to flounder in warm and shallow seas. Before we're taken to the deep for love, the only end that can be is love. Love that flounders in shallow seas.
Nice. No surrealism in that one.
No, sir.
Really stripped back, and it reminds me of those kind of Beckett, very skinny lines, you know.
Yeah, like dread nay and stuff like that, like 2 words and you fill in the blanks kind of thing. And yeah, it was very, very much inspired by like I said, my early reading of Beckett, and the idea that, like I said, going back to Waiting for God, is it all meaningless? Well, sure, if it is, then it's up to us to find our meaning. And
that's a heavy responsibility, though.
Is it?
You're completely responsible for all meaning.
No, your own. Well, for all meaning. Well, hang on, you just opened a brilliant door there.
Oh, shit. I've relieved my solipsistic nature.
Yeah, you're responsible for
all
egomaniac. For all. Wow. Okay, so you're now the architect of the Matrix.
I am absolutely an egomaniac. Yeah. I think everybody knows that.
You're the architect of the Matrix. There, that's brilliant. So you're now responsible for all meaning.
All meaning.
Okay, that is a heavy hat. Yeah, that's a heavy hat to wear. Okay. No,
do you not think it's a heavy responsibility to be picking your own meaning too? I mean, I feel like, you know, I read a book by.
I'd rather that than someone else give it to me.
Yeah, fair enough. I read a book called The Soul of the Marionette. I think it was with John Gray or something. He's making an argument that actually, like, free will is a heavy weight around our necks. And what humanity really wants, what humans really want, is to be free of it. That we want to be kind of like a marionette, like a puppet.
Well, we respond very, very well to order and structure and pattern, don't we? And in fact, what was the Richard Dawkins book we shared there recently? It was the
Selfish Gene.
The Selfish Gene, absolutely, where he talks about that free will itself, based on his theory, could actually be a myth. That we're actually just, what did he call us, gene vehicles?
Yeah,
just getting around.
How does that sit with you as a kind of? For me, when I hear that, you like that idea.
I quite liked it coming from him, and I know that. Let me explain that. So, when you're sitting talking to someone who's so profoundly knowledgeable in their field, for me, there's a sense of security in the information they're giving you, if you know what I mean. So you can kind of trust their information. Like, you know, that's why I love listening to Professor Brian Cox. When he does those shows on the BBC talking about the planets, you're like, you know, he's going to tell you the truth, the actual fact. So when Richard Dawkins was talking about that theory in the selfish gene, you kind of go, well, yeah, it's down to, that's why I say it's on you and your responsibility to have your own meaning within that. Go, right, well, these are the facts, because facts aren't a thing that's like going to be gentle with your feelings. So it's just, like I said, it's like a Y junction in your life where you can take that information and run with it, or you can deny it. That's the only real other option with facts.
What I find interesting about what you said there, though, is that doesn't seem like a Y junction to me. That seems like 2 completely different super highways that never meet. It's just that whole thing of.
Well, I mean Y junction in the sense that you now have information. You can choose to.
No. You need to let me finish. The whole thing about the subconscious, you know, not being defined by form or rules, inspiration.
Okay, yeah.
Those things are very kind of human spirit, human creativity, and they're kind of foregrounding inspiration, kind of the aleatory, the chaotic, the kind of subconscious. It's really not logic and rules, is it?
No.
Whereas something like we're a gene vehicle.
It might be, but we just don't know yet. But
a gene vehicle is completely the opposite. We're totally determined by the rules of our genes. You know, that is form.
Well, based on that, I'm perfectly willing to accept your comparison of totally parallel superhighways. Because, yeah, I mean, Richard Dawkins isn't claiming to be an expert of the mind. You know, I personally think we write songs and poetry and make art because we still can't describe certain aspects of our emotional being. We can't articulate them. We still can't describe what love is, for example. You know, and even though perfectly mature people can be able to talk about it frankly, we still can't put our finger on what is it. What is that chemically and emotionally within us that does it? So, but I don't think that's at loggerheads. Richard Dawkins is talking about our physical body, our gene makeup of our physical body. Whereas, maybe we're crossing back into the spiritual context. Then when we talk about the mind, is that then something separate?
Yeah.
Or do we just not know what it is yet?
Well, I feel like he's deconstructing these classic kind of body, body mind. It's kind of,
you nearly said soul. Go on.
Yeah. Well, there you go. You know what I mean? I mean it's a word that kind of will bandy around there, doesn't it? We can call it whatever we want.
It does jump into that hole, though, doesn't it?
Is consciousness just is consciousness just a trick of chemicals and biology, and that goes with the whole gene machine.
Yeah, well, it does, but weirdly, it actually falls onto the other side of spirituality as well, because it makes us, if it is a trick or a special chemical accident that happened, it does make us very exceptionally special then indeed. So if we're the only ones who accidentally that happened to somewhere along our evolution.
God, we haven't smoked any weed and we're talking absolute smack.
Get the weed.
Give me a bit of weed.
Alright, so listen, talking of absolute smack, Ooftish. Absolutely brilliant poem by Samuel Beckett. Dealing with the whole idea that life should or is supposed to be pain, and how you're meant to deal with that. So, offer it up, plank it down. Golgotha was only the pot egg. Cancer, angina, it is all one to us. Cough up your TB, don't be stingy. No trifle is too trifling, not even thrombus. Anything venereal is especially welcome. That old toga in the mothballs. Don't be sentimental, you won't be wanting it again. Send it along, we'll put it in the pot with the rest, with your love requited and unrequited. The things taken too late and things taken too soon, the spirit aching bullock scrotum. You won't cure it, you won't endure it. It is you, it equals you, any fool has to pity you. So parcel up the whole issue and send it along. The whole misery, diagnosed, undiagnosed, misdiagnosed. Get your friends to do the same and we'll make use of it. We'll make sense of it, we'll put it in the pot with the rest. It all boils down to blood of lamb.
Yeah, I can see how they get the Catholic thing right. Well, the Christian thing there with the lamb reference. Right
well, weirdly, yeah. In one of the, especially with Golgotha, the biblical term for where Jesus was crucified, where the crosses were erected and stuff. So, but he's actually saying Golgotha was only the start. It's like nothing compared to what we have to suffer with, which is why I was saying the Irish cynicism leaks in as early as that for me. And in one of the analytics I read they were saying in the original version, it was very Christian because at the end he had written the blood of the lamb, which is very directly Christian reference. But then in the later edit it became blood of lamb, which is more a Passover reference. So that's why they were wondering about it going back and forth. But still, it definitely remains a religious undertone.
Interesting.
About the life is sufferance and penance and all that,
Yeah, very interesting. Speaking of suffering, I saw that one of your friends Jay Murphy was in trouble.
Jay Murphy was in a whole heap of trouble. He's doing slightly better, but he's still in big trouble. So he went in, obviously during this whole crisis, no one wanted to get sick and go to hospital. But he went in. I've done a lot of reading apparently on diabetes lately because of him. So he went into hospital with a thing called DKA, which is diabetic ketoacidosis. I've learned how to say it, still don't know what the fuck it is. I can sound smart asking the doctor about it, but so it's like an extreme reaction, whereas keto acids were huge in his body, causing kind of organ failure and stuff. And so he was rushed into hospital, then contracted pneumonia, and then was put on a ventilator. All sorts of shenanigans going wrong with him. And he's come off the ventilator now. He did a post on Facebook, but he had to have an operation where they put a tube in his stomach, where he's going to be fed directly into his stomach because he still can't swallow and everything. But look, it's a step in the right direction. So we've got our fingers crossed for Jay. His family have a crowdfunding thing out there because he's in the USA and healthcare costs in the USA, I don't mind saying it, are amoral. They're not just repulsive. But anyway, that's a whole other discussion for a whole other day. But yeah, the crowdfund is out there to help Jay get well.
I'll never forget Jay, because at the end of our kind of band days, when we had nowhere to live, Jay, I'll never forget it. I was working at a computer's place, and what did I do? I think I put an advert.
Is that the place where you wrote the book while at work?
Yeah.
It's not too soon to still say that, is it? Okay.
So I was trying to write a book while I was working in this computer's job, because basically I was a tester, and it was a piece of piss job, and it was not intellectually engaging whatsoever, and I was kind of felt like my brain was dribbling out my ear. I was on the computer all the time, so just writing a novel, as you do, attempting to write a novel,
as you do at work.
And I put an advert up on Gumtree, and I got a phone call from Jay Murphy. It's going, "How you doing?" I was like, "Oh, it's an Irish guy." I was like, "Oh, this sounds good." And he goes, "You're just looking for a place to put your head, are you?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah." You
won't appreciate that impression.
Yeah, sorry, Jim. Yeah. Please don't punch me. You're a big man. Even if you're sick, you'd fucking crush me. And he was like, "Yeah, you're a musician, are you?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "My dad was a musician. I know all about."
Straight into the yarn, yeah. That's Jay.
Started, Jay straight away with the stories.
Yeah.
And so he said, "Yeah, come down. I've got a room. It's not nice or anything. Somewhere to put down your head. Low rent." Went over there. Down to Vauxhall, the Pilgrim pub.
What a pub it was as well.
Yeah, it's a lovely little pub.
It made being there a lot sweeter.
Yeah. With the kind of gas towers in the background. Just up the road, the mad 24-hour gay scene with lots of really banging clubs and everything. It's a crazy place, really, wasn't it?
And then from the roof you could see the Oval, couldn't you?
Yeah, you could see the Oval, yeah.
The cricket ground, yeah.
So he brings me upstairs to have a look at this room, and it's absolutely decrepit. It's like
I swear I thought you were about to say it's absolutely perfect.
It's fucking decrepit. It's got a couch in it, a bed in it, and it's got a fridge with a microwave on top, with a toaster on top. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I remember thinking, this is fucking perfect.
Yeah.
This is exactly what I need.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, since lockdown, I've been rewriting a novel about Murph. Not about Murph.
No, but Jay Murphy, of course. Yeah. The story Murph.
So there was a little bit of inspiration about it. I thought I'd read you a bit of this.
Oh, definitely, can't wait.
This description of the room.
Let's go back to the Pilgrim after this, because there's so much good stuff to talk about there.
Let me try and get it.
Like, for example, when how I ended up living in the Pilgrim, in the room next door to you, was I broke up with a girlfriend, and I found myself not homeless, but actually I was. I said because I left in a huff. You know me, not given to thinking things through. So I was like, "That's it, I'm leaving." And I packed my bag, singular. Guitar, the guitar case.
A bag.
And I left. Turned up at yours,
full of beer.
And I was like, "Yo, man, can I stay on your couch for a night or two?" And you're like, "Yeah, no worries." And then next day I'm talking to Jay Murphy downstairs, and it goes into Jay gave me a room, and then I was leaving my job, and he said to me, he's like, "Hey, listen, do you want to subsidise your rent? I need a bartender." And I was like, "Oh yeah." So he gave me a room, a job, then a gig, but way more important than those three things, even though they are massive, Jay was full of great life advice, full of great company, never ever didn't have time for you. And like I said, just full of great life advice, just a great guy all around. But that ended up in the Pilgrim. What a great time.
So that place is kind of the inspiration. I've moved it to New York, and it's not me and it's not Murph, but the room reminds me of that particular room. So I thought I'd read this out. For at least the last 40 years, although the exact date of acquisition was not known, Studs Treacle had been in possession of an 80-storey building in Greenwich Village. How precisely a man whose only previous occupation had been in a brief but notorious stint as brace player for the Pricks could ever afford to purchase such real estate, relatively sought after even in the 80s, was not known. The more plausible theories ranged from aristocratic heritage of a vaguely East European origin to tales of a high-stakes poker game where a Russian oligarch, allegedly a big mover in the human organs trade, had seen Studs' 2 kidneys and raised him the keys to the Greenwich Village apartment block. Then, of course, there were the base and groundless rumours. Studs was not a man who cared for rumour. He ran what he termed an open house for the open-minded. There was no form to fill in, and there was no stated entry criteria. Anyone in possession of a curriculum vitae or references of any sort would be rejected on principle. Fame likewise held no sway, and if there was one thing more repulsive than fame, then it was wealth. That crowd could buy a postcard at the Chelsea Hotel and fuck off back to mediocrity. Any suburbanite coming to the village to play cool before retreating back to the suburbs to die was sniffed out by Studs' rat-like nose the moment they stepped foot into the lobby. Despite the perpetual gloom, Mr. Treacle's eyes were hidden behind sunglasses. His boots were raised on the desk, and he read novels that one could only assume had been library books owing to the absence of a cover and the plethora of stamps on the inside page. As Alex stepped in off the pavement wearing a pair of Groucho Marx glasses and a fake moustache, Studs Treacle sniffed the air. Hello? She said. Studs made no verbal response and offered no physical acknowledgement of the presence of a potential customer. Are you busy? Want me to come back later? Nothing. Then, according to the sheer dumb look that makes or breaks a maiden voyage in New York, her eyes adjusted to the thick gloom and noticed that the landlord was reading Down and Out in Paris and London. Orwell, huh? She said, setting down her guitar case. You've read Orwell? Said Studs, lowering the book an inch. I've read that Orwell. You've been to Paris? I've probably been to New York. She tried to laugh, but there was something about the slow collapsing wallpaper that seemed to prohibit it. Studs read to the end of the chapter without further comment. The low pulsing of a double bass started somewhere above. A guitar clanged to the floor. A woman poured forth a stream of Russian vitriol. Alex watched the stairwell and kept one hand on her possessions. The muffled thud of bodies, bed springs starting to groan. Studs lowered the book and inspected the new arrival without acknowledging the groans above. The candidate before him did not appear to be another tourist, but looks could be deceiving. Doubly so if the individual was wearing a pair of Groucho Marx glasses. You some kind of sex offender? Excuse me? Said Alex. The disguise. You some sicko or what? It's Halloween night, said Alex, pulling off the glasses. You can scan me if you want. Bluffing with Studs Treacle was not a wise move, but he admired the balls of it. Do I look like I care about your little online life? Do I look like I care if you care? Said Alex, bringing her voice just shy of a shout to overcome the rapidly increasing groans from upstairs. Musician? Asked Studs, with a nonchalant gesture towards the guitar case. Yeah? Folk? Fuck no, punk! The sound of a headboard thudding against the wall. And you've read Orwell? Some. The Smiths or the Clash? The Clash. Lennon and McCarthy. Well, I don't really. Lennon or McCarthy. Fine, neither. Studs snorted. He lowered his boots from the counter. He reached to the key hooks behind his head and tossed the key on the counter. 6th floor, bottom of the corridor, last door on the left. Well, how much is that? Later. But when should I? Later, said Studs, raising up his skinned book and blocking all further communication. The groaning upstairs came to a climax, and feeling like she'd just passed some sort of test, although for what and for whom she could not exactly say, Alex felt oddly compelled to proceed at pace. She picked up her guitar case, with its lone New York sticker, and made for the elevator. The contraption was one of those cage affairs that displayed its innards to the public like some industrial autopsy. The LED screen, shipped in from 1982 or some other distant galaxy, read 3rd floor when the tin box was obviously here in the lobby. She pressed 6 and said her prayers. She was disgorged in a hallway serviced by a broken window with bits of broken plastic hissing in the glass. The room was everything she hoped for, an absolute and utter dive. A single bed that bowed in the centre, sheets you wouldn't cast over a dead hobo, a camping stove sitting on a microwave plonked on a fridge. The right wall was dominated by 2 large windows that, although intact, gave onto a brick wall. The couch along the rear wall had obviously spent some time down the back of an alleyway frequented by feral cats. In the gap between the couch and the rear wall was a piece of wood masquerading as a writing desk. On this was propped a computer of the sort Alex presumed to have gone extinct in 2005. Alex's first act was to pull the computer from the desk, put the screen and camera keyboard in a box, stuff the box with the dirty sheets, shove the box into the broom closet and wedge her guitar and rucksack up against the closet door. Then she removed the Groucho Marx disguise, had a good look around the room and smiled. It was a place her mother would cry to see her in. It was a place the pretenders back home in Shitsville, USA would never hack, but she would hack it. She was heavily armed for such circumstances. From her bag she unloaded Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, A Confederacy of Dunces, The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay, a New York trilogy, and everything ever written by Oscar Wilde. Having unpacked her books and arranged them in autobiographical order, that being the order in which they made their appearance in her life, there was little else to lift in the bag. A few t-shirts, a couple of pairs of jeans, and a small bag of toiletries. The problem of sheets would have to wait till the problem of money was sorted. She draped a towel over the mattress, and happy that she had done everything that she could be done, she sat down to do what she had come to NYC to do. She took out her guitar case and began to play.
Great, well done. That's a really great passage, man. That's a really great passage. I think you've painted brilliant imagery there because the way it keeps cutting out of the dialogue to the noises coming from upstairs and then different bits going on around and back into the dialogue, then cut out for another different couple of bits going on. And what I thought, not confused, but what could be perceived as either the stream of Russian vitriol, was it?
Oh yeah.
So I was like, wait, is that just a really great way of somebody pouring straight vodka? Or are you talking about a woman shouting in Russian?
Yeah, I was talking about a woman shouting.
Oh, okay, because it could easily be a glass of neat vodka, couldn't it? But yeah, so that room, are you kind of relaying how you felt about delving into your writing when you found the room in the Pilgrim? What
I find interesting just about that thing, just because when the Murph thing came back up with that music and him being sick and everything, it reminded me of this passage. And even though I've said it in New York, and even though it's not Murph and it's a hotel now rather than a bar, and there was no Russian.
Well, the room is the kernel
it's
of
the
the
room,
idea, isn't it? Yeah.
Like that room. When she goes into that room, I know that room so well.
Yeah.
That it's interesting that relationship between your experience, your real lived experience, and the fiction that you're going to write. It's like the raw material. You put her in that room, and if you've been in that room, then you know the details, the authentic details that make that room real to anybody else who's been in a room like it.
Yeah, you're not just making up.
You're not
a place where a dingy little back room where a writer may find themselves. You're not imagining it. You've been there. Yeah, you can smell it,
and you can kind of say to yourself, I think, a lot of the time, fiction is fiction, and I'll write whatever I want. I can be whoever I want. But I guess people can sniff it out when you haven't. Well, what do you think about that? How far do you have to have lived what you're writing? Well, how much license have you got?
That's a great question. I think when you say I'm a fiction writer, anyone says I'm a fiction writer. Personally, to me, that is like you have full license to say and write whatever the hell you want because it's fiction. And a lot of people will argue that, and that argument is also fine. I'm willing to have that discussion. But to me, it's kind of like comedy. When people talk about a safe place and safe space, to me, I think comedy is the only safe space that should exist. Where someone says I'm a comedian and I'm joking, therefore it doesn't matter if someone's offended or blah 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 blah. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm talking people should definitely read a room and they should think for their times, definitely. But similarly with fiction, it's just made up stuff. However, that can also depend on the reader. So let's say someone who's never had a particularly hard time writes an absolute tragedy. But then one of their readers, it could be echoing their life exactly, and they're going, this isn't fiction, this is my life, and it's shit, and I'm having such a hard time. Or in the total reverse, rather than make it dark, in the total reverse, somebody fucking have an amazing time. Or someone could write an autobiography, and because it's not the reader's lived experience, it's still fiction to the reader.
Yeah, I think you definitely can write whatever you... Well, it seems to me that you can write whatever you want. I'd agree with you on that. But what I do believe is that, let's go with that example you just gave. Okay, the person's written a tragedy. Let's say, I don't want to go into kind of really controversial areas. Let's just keep it. He's written a tragedy.
A tragedy. A horrible thing has happened. Yeah.
I think the thing is that if you haven't got any real experience about that, I think people can tell, or especially people who've lived it, can tell that it's like that room. Do you know what I mean?
Well, people who lived it can
if you haven't lived that experience, are you ever going to come up with that image?
Well, you're talking about the authenticity of what you're doing now.
But I'm not interested in whether it's real or not. I'm interested in whether it's well done or not.
Well, so
because
whether
the purpose of the fiction
real,
is to allow your reader, for me anyway, to disappear into that world.
Yeah.
And for that to happen, I think you need to be able to see the cogent, the really kind of relevant details of that world that make the world real or vivid in the mind of the person.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you don't have any real experience of the thing, whatever it might be, whatever the experience might be, I think you're I mean, it's probably possible. You know what I mean? I mean, there are people who are incredibly talented to be able to do it, but I think it's a much, much harder job when you're writing about something that you're not really grounded in.
I think yeah, but I think also it comes down to your powers of communication. So, for example, like you say, there could be a person who has an incredible imagination, incredible ability to communicate, who hasn't lived it, and they're able to put it across like they have. That's fiction writing, and well done to them. But then it could also be a case where, a person who has lived it, but they're not the best communicator, who maybe can't get it across, and they think because they have lived it, saying as little as possible of that is enough, because I've lived it, therefore you can take my word as gospel and blah. So I don't know. I mean,
is it important to you that people who've had, let's just go there, fuck it, somebody who's been raped or sexually abused?
Oh shit, yeah.
This whole idea of kind of like somebody else telling those stories when they haven't lived that experiance.
Oh,
is that kind of like
I thought you were talking
your pen
about
into someone else's
car crash
blood
or something, but
or racism, for example.
Yeah. Right. Well, in those circumstances, it's a toughie, because if you're writing a war novel, for example, and if you're writing about war in the olden times, where we know when towns were being pillaged and burned, that raping the female population was a big part of almost a tactic of terror and imposition of power. So the first thing I'd think about is it necessary to put this in? And if it's necessary, do you have to have lived it? No, but I'd certainly be really, really careful about how I wrote it down. I wouldn't be...
You want to be damn sure you've got a good reason to be...
Yeah, you want to... It has to be pivotal for it to be in there, because you're dealing with such a thing that, there's going to be people out there who won't be bothered about whether you've lived it or not. There'll be people, because they lived it, they're like, why the fuck is this here? You know, I'm sitting on an airplane about to fly on my holidays. I paid $11.99 for a paperback, and I'm reliving the worst moments of my entire life.
And it's not even authentic.
Yeah, and you know, this isn't how it went down at all. Because because in the book the police believed her and the guy got arrested. Sorry, I'm just having a go at the way things are, because in real life those things, not only are they the most horrible things, they usually turn out even shittier. You know what I mean? They usually turn out with someone going, well, was she wearing a short skirt, or did you provoke him in any way? You know, and all that sort of nonsense. So if someone's going to talk, you know, we're talking about sex offence probably for a long time, and that the length of time we're now talking about it is probably evidence that you need to be extremely careful putting that in. And it's got to be important if it is in.
Yeah, I'd agree. It's kind of about, you know, not. I think it's. I can't remember who said it. Kit Duvall said something about, like, you know, you shouldn't dip your pen in other people's blood. It's that kind of whole thing of kind of like misappropriating other people's experiences. Yeah. But then I'm always kind of, you know, fiction. For me, it, you know, going back to Gascoyne and kind of McGough and that kind of. I don't want to put rules on things and say, oh, somebody can't be, you know, a woman can't be a man, you know, you know.
Well, it comes down to research, really, doesn't it? I mean,
research.
If you think, going back to the war,
to showing respect and knowing enough about
going back to
it
the war novel thing, and let's say remove the terrible atrocities, but let's just talk about the experience of a soldier. You know, so there's lots and lots and lots of stories out there in films and books that were written by people who didn't serve. You know, so but there's also, you know, a lot of information about the research that's been done about going and hanging out in a certain place with certain people for a given amount, just to make sure they have the correct language, the correct communications between the soldiers, the correct references to weaponry in the correct circumstances, and so on and so on. So maybe research covers a lot of those gaps.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Well,
that's basically what it is.
Kind
right?
of, yeah. Kind
okay, you've got the power to create whatever worlds, whatever you want, but you've got a responsibility to the people you're describing or to the experiences to get it right and to be sensitive to whatever's going on.
Well, yeah, I mean, call it responsibility, because people have done it and not been responsible about it at all. But yeah, actually, no, I backtrack immediately, because those people have been called out almost straight away.
Well, not always, I think. In the past. I mean, now there's a lot more calling people on things.
Yeah, people can just jump on Google and go, this guy's talking absolute piss.
Cancel this motherfucker.
Yeah, exactly.
You're cancelled. Great. You got anything else you want to drop on us?
No, for tonight, I don't want to waste all my good stuff. Keep it for a few of the VD live sessions.
So the next Club VD is going to be on the 2nd of July. We're do it on Google Meet. You can see the link on the bottom of your screen there. We're also getting ready for VD Anthology number 2, volume 2, and we're gonna play 2 tracks from VD Anthology number 1. The first one you're going to hear from is from me. Slightly surrealist, linking with the Gascoyne kind of thing. And then the second one you're going to hear is from Mr. Hennebry, closing the show. Thanks for coming in tonight, Rob.
An absolute pleasure.
You'll be at attendance, I'm sure, at Club VD number 21.
July 2nd, absolutely. It's a date.
Fabulous.
Is it 21?
21.
21 VDs.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
They can't stop us.
That's brilliant. I mean, that's another one of those things. Started at like, let's give this a crack and see what happens. 21 months.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Okay. Peace out.
Proof. That's all some people live on. That's their bread and butter, their oxygen and 2 parts hydrogen. If you can survive on 1 + 1 = 2, the earth spinning around the sun and all that clear-cut codology, then fair enough. This story is probably not for you. I've been a librarian in Ballyfarnan, County Roscommon for 23 years, and I've seen all sorts come and go. Old men looking for a quiet corner to read the paper, and mad young fellas searching for the meaning of life. They all take refuge in my dusty old library. Little Jesse fit into none of those camps. He was what some people would call an anomaly. The feckin' PC gobshites. In truth, he was a freak, a weirdo, a bloody nuisance. And I knew from the second I clapped eyes on him that trouble was on its way. I was neck deep in new books with shiny covers and ludicrous titles like How to Be Happy and Understanding Your Wife, when I got that creepy, crawly feeling that I was being watched. I popped my head over the tower of books on my desk, and sure enough there was a baldy-headed child with goldfish eyes swimming behind a pair of milk bottle glasses. I put my left eye on him, and I gave him the squint, but he didn't flinch, not in the slightest. A cheeky little fucker, I thought, and stood up, scratching my rickety wooden chair across the broken tile floor. "What do you want there?" I barked at him, and hocked up as much phlegm as my smoky lungs could muster. He smiled back at me, serene, calm, and insolent. Right, I thought. This little fucker's getting a clip around the ear. I charged towards the countertop, swinging my bad leg, and was loading up my left hand to deliver a bit of schmocked when I saw the pile of books he was holding. I put my left eye on him again, watching for a grin or a snigger. Anything to give away a prank. Was this little fucker actually taking out books? In the 23 years I worked here, no one under the age of 18 had ever taken out a book. Of course, the non-linear, spontaneous stream of consciousness cataloguing method, implemented in this library by our resident visionary, Dr. Benjamin Murphy, makes finding a book unassisted a near impossibility. The explicit nature of Dr. Murphy's method means children are never treated to the great man's help. I held my eye on him. I noticed a strange sheen coming off his body. "Well, what's your game, young fella?" "Hello, John James. My name is Jesse, and my mammy told me everything about you and how I could get any book I wanted from this library, and how, even if you don't have it, you could call a man up in Dublin and he'll put it in a van and drive it all the way to Roscommon so that I can read it, and it won't even use up all my pocket money because I need that for buying nice paper for writing my stories that my mammy says are better than some of the books grown-ups have written," he said, placing the selections on the counter. As he crossed his arms, I heard the faint sound of folding paper. Now, if I walk through this village and meet a face with a new wrinkle, I'm shocked. But this took the biscuit. "And who's your mammy, young fella?" I asked. "My mammy is Mary, and we've come all the way from Japan, where people eat fish without cooking it and don't speak English except for the boys and girls my mammy taught their ABCs. Well, I should have guessed he was from that lot. Bloody blow-ends. That Mary one was forever setting tongues wagging. Not a boyfriend in sight, let alone a husband, and she gets up the duff. Feckin' hussy. And here's the product. I pick up the books and prepare myself for another battle with the stupid feckin' computer. Hang on a second, I thought. A naked lunch. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. On the road. This is his mother's reading, no doubt. Ashamed to get the filth herself. Sending her innocent child to do the dirty work for her. "Here now, Jesse. Who asked you to get these books?" I said, leaning forwards on the counter, tapping the filthy, dirty trash. "Nobody asked me to get them, John James," he said, eyes still wide open. Well, I thought, she's taught him how to tell bare-faced lies to adults too. A holy disgrace. A bloody damned outrage. Still, he only learns what he's shown, poor fella. There's no substitution for parenting. He'll come to a bad end, no doubt about it. Well, Jesse, do me a favour, will you? I said, taking the poor lost soul into my confidence. Yes, Mr. John James, I will. You tell your mammy John James says everyone should do their own dirty work. I said, handing him down the long-haired weirdo propaganda I presumed, and hoped, would never return to the shelves of Ballyfern Library. So you can see the boy was a freak. That is, of course, a subjective point of view. I'd never tried to pass it off as the truth. Absolute knowledge has been proven to be a myth. Now, I know some people swear green is never pink and mayonnaise never tastes like watermelon. But what can I say? There are always leaders and followers. Dr. Murphy is a prime example of a leader. He's the Daniel O'Donnell of librarian studies, a true genius and a shining light. After graduating from Trinity College with a gold medal, he pioneered the psychedelic cataloguing movement. His career was, however, cut short by a tragic accident involving the local fungi that grows wild in the fields around Ballyfarnan. He may be stuck in a wheelchair and borderline catatonic, but he can still pick out the location of War and Peace faster than any newfangled modern jiggery-pokery. So when 3 days later another gobshite, young and arrogant enough to think there are answers, approached the counter and said, "I can't find Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment under D." I turned to the great man, spittle dried in the corner of his mouth, hair sprouting from his ear, and said, "Please, Dr. Murphy, would you be so kind as to tell us where Crime and Punishment is located?" The great man's eyes, locked shut by inches of dried yellow pus, could be seen oscillating rapidly. Mucus seeped from his nose, and he began, "Crime and Punishment, garlic in my left sock. 1932, cheetahs on steroids waltzing to subterranean homesick blues. Killer whales stuffed with mouldy underwear. Nuns masturbating with sawn-off crosses under neon pyramids in Hampstead. Aisle 5, road 3. I smiled at the baffled young pup and led him to his chosen waste of time. As I handed him the book, a frozen shock. Across the dimly lit hall, my good eye fixed on a baldy-headed boy up on the desk, flattened under a pile of books. Now, we've all seen 999 Rescue. Fools have a talent for finding their end in the most ridiculous fashions, and to be honest, my poor heart feared the worst. "Call an ambulance!" I shouted at the philandering philosopher and charged to Jessie's rescue. A tower of books stood, perfectly balanced on the back of the flattened child. I ripped him free and in a wild panic carried his incredibly narrow frame out the door. My bad leg was temporarily resurrected by pure adrenaline, and I charged through Ballyfarnan, making for Dr. Crowley's surgery at the top of the hill. Well, I thought, he won't be coming to a bad end on my watch. I'll run him all the way to the hospital if needs be. The lad's face was a horrible yellow tea-brown with ears folded flat on his cheeks. I began to lose heart when suddenly his big goldfish eyes popped open. "You're alive! Holy Mary, Immaculate Sacred Heart of Jesus, thank fuck for that!" I shouted in relief, accelerating with newfound hope. "Where are we going, John James?" said Jessie, smiling with cheerful amusement. "To the hospital, child! You've been flattened by a tower of books!" "I haven't been flattened, John James. I was just taking a nap." I trundled to a stop, dull pain groaning in my bad leg, sweat pouring from my brow, and an almighty urge to beat the liven shite out of the boy bubbling in my stomach. "You little brat, you nearly gave me a heart attack. Playing in the books! It will take Dr. Murphy months to fix all that. Wait till I box your ears for you," I said, plonking him down, but keeping a firm hold of his arm. "I wasn't playing, John James. I promise I wasn't. I was reading The Magic Mountain," he said, cowering and squirming in my grasp. "Like hell you were. No one reads that book," I said, giving him the first clip of many. "I was, John James, I was. How can you say I wasn't? Please believe me," cried the child. Well, I thought, the little fucker's found my weak spot. Am I now claiming absolute knowledge about his literacy? If he wants to waste the day pretending to read The Magic Mountain and then get a whipping, so be it. I can retain my fidelity to philosophical skepticism and still issue just retribution. "Were you now? Fair enough. You've till the end of the day, then we'll have a little quiz." So I grabbed him by the ear and led him down to the library, deposited him at the desk, located Thomas Mann's classic, and threw it in his lap. I fixed him with my good eye, giving him one last chance at free admission, which he didn't take. If only Beckett had been right, I thought. If only hussies like Mary did indeed give birth astride a grave. If only the light gleamed but for an instant before all darkness once more. I'd be free of the young pup, free to devote my undivided attention to the volumes of Blavatsky and Olcott, which had just arrived in their original Russian from Bombay. But alas, if his mother wasn't going to take him in hand, someone had to. This is a temple of psychedelic cataloguing, not a fecking playground. I began reading the esoteric wisdom of the secret doctrine, but kept my good eye trained on the exit for any attempted escape. Closing time came round, and I walked around the shelves to find the little fucker gone. Well, I thought, he's a coward on top of everything else. And I locked the front door. I searched the toilets. I looked under the stairs. I flung open the doors of each and every cupboard. Then, as I searched the aisles themselves, the light bulbs hanging high in the rafters began to flicker spasmodically. The periodicals were plunged into darkness. Maps of the Geological Survey vanished from sight. Textbooks and reference books and manuals of all sorts advanced from the far wall. But as I turned into the fiction section, the filaments of the bulbs began to burn as if fueled by the very souls of the damned. It was then that I noticed, sitting aloft a pile of books, a strange translucent volume. No doubt the fucker's been playing in the stacks again, I thought. Long used to doing as he pleases, and damn the consequences. Well, he'll soon learn. He may have escaped this time, but there's no bog deep enough in all of Ireland to hide him from the wrath of John James. I grabbed the books off the desk, made my way back to the front of the library and handed the strange translucent volume to Dr. Murphy for reassertion. "No title on this one, Dr. Murphy. What do you think?" I inquired of the great mind. He lifted the book to his nose and sniffed. A shudder passed through his being and he began. "Transylvanian Marching Band, Pink Flamingo Soup, Genital warts bleeding in the Indian dawn. Yoko Yoko marmalade sauce. The flesh became word. The flesh became word!" He shouted, his eyes snapping open, sending crusty yellow shrapnel flying in all directions. He leaped to his feet, vigorous and fecund, roaring, "And the flesh became word!" Well, a lot of things began to make sense. The sound of folding paper when he crossed his arms, the familiar shine, yellow tea-brown face, slender width, and preferred sleeping arrangements. I'd never encountered Professor de Selby's theory of subatomic interchange in readers. I'd always believed the phenomenon to be confined to fanatical cyclists, but alas, I was mistaken. The boy had, through prolonged exposure, turned himself into a book. I wouldn't have given a monkey's, but for the effect that it had on Dr. Murphy. He glided straight out of the library, grasping the book to his chest, and began preaching the word according to Jesse. This being a good Catholic town, his message of peace and love was met with stern resistance.
Noisy Mind by Rob Hennebry. The setting sun gets trapped in a gap between earth and sky. It turns the clouds behind me silver, grey and orange. I forage for a meaning, the assumption seeming just that. Facts become malleable. As imagination chews through its shackles, inspiration is the instigation for the racket in a noisy mind. I don't mind those who dose their anxieties, but mine are my pieties. So I wait, faithfully knowing that at the end, each end is a big bang, a clang, as reality gets blasted away, and logic strays. And security is breached and betrayed, so waves collapse down, 1, 2, and I drown. Deeper now I look around, and light is sound, and away splits the ground in which we found lost foundations of nations where philosophies now abound. And still the universe gets louder, but then, hey, are you okay? And I look around. I pick up my bag and get gone as the sun goes down and the billions come out to make us think of things like time and join the symphony of whispers that never let peace take root in a noisy mind.